Undoubtedly, composting was practiced in ancient times in different parts of the world. The Israelites, Greeks, and Romans used organic waste directly or composted them. Initially, the composting process was anaerobic, but later it was modified to an aerobic process and renamed the Bangalore process. The basic concept was to utilize vegetable and animal wastes and night soil, that is having human excreta, mixing them with an alkaline material for neutralizing acidity and managing the mass through turning for aeration and water addition. The second half of the 1970s witnessed a drastic shift in the emphasis of composting. Facilities were designed to treat a number of substrates ranging from manures to organic fraction of municipal solid waste to biosolids. Now, it is an important method employed in several industries to address the problem of solid waste generated. Compost resembles humus, but it comprises of materials in various stages of decomposition. Some may be broken down quickly, others may require multiple rounds of destruction from varied specialized microorganisms and soil invertebrates. A pile of compost may contain some humus, but there is still plenty of work available in the heap for the decomposers. In this episode, let us understand the process of biological composting in the following headings. The first, factors influencing the composting. The second, the composting process, the different types of composting, phases of composting, and role of microorganisms in composting. Let us understand what are the factors influencing the composting process. Understanding the basic principles of composting can have a significant bearing on the process and product. There are several factors which influence the composting process in different stages. The major factors that affect the rate of decomposition of the organic matter during composting are oxygen and moisture. Many technologies are better at providing and maintaining proper oxygen and moisture in the process. So, let us understand what is the oxygen and aeration required for composting. Composting is an aerobic process and therefore requires oxygen, no doubt. Oxygen is provided through aeration. The provision of oxygen depends on the aeration process, which is a function of the system. Windrow composting provides oxygen through the turning process and by convection. Aerated static pile, agitated bed, and other system provide oxygen through blowers. For oxygen to reach the microbial population, there need to be sufficient porosity through the matrix. The porosity is dependent on the feedstock, its moisture content, and particle size. Biosolids and food waste are dense and have high moisture content. Therefore, bulking agents are usually used. These can either be natural materials such as wood chips, sawdust, and yard waste, or artificial material such as shredded rubber tires, etc. Oxygen levels above 10% are usually provided. When the oxygen level is below 5%, it can become limiting to the aerobic microorganisms. At this level, anaerobic gases such as methane are generally generated. The another important component for composting process is moisture, so which can also be a limiting factor in this process. Generally, the rate of microbial activity decreases when the moisture level in the compost is below 40%. At 20%, microbial activity is essentially ceased. When the moisture content in the compost exceeds 60%, the pore space can be filled with water. Then oxygen can become limiting and overall microbial activity also decreases. Generally, bacteria are more sensitive to soil moisture than actinomycetes and fungi. Both actinomycetes and fungi tend to predominate in dry soils since they form resisting structures. Since the composting process is a drying process, as water is lost due to the increased temperature, moisture control is very important. The optimal moisture level during the composting process appears to be near 50%. However, the control of the moisture is also important from a processing point of view. Many facilities prefer to screen the compost and recover the bulking agent immediately after composting and before curing. Most screens are effective at moisture contents below 45%. Therefore, maximum composting is carried out at moisture contents between 50 and 55%. The temperature is another component. The change in temperatures are the result of microbial activity. Temperatures rise from ambient to mesophilic and then to thermophilic. During these temperature variations, the microbial population also subjected to change. These changes are very important as they enable the different microorganisms to metabolize the various components of the feedstocks. The temperature is also important to control pathogens as well as to destroy weed seeds. As the process progresses and the available nutrients for the microorganisms are consumed or metabolized, temperatures will drop and at some point return to close to ambient. The rate of heat production is proportional to the available organic material for microbial consumption. The decline of temperature to near ambient is an indication that the process is near completion and that the material probably is stable and mature. Maintaining temperature is often a function of operating conditions. So, what are these factors? It is pile structure, pile volume, pile insulation, pile moisture, pile oxygen, ambient environmental conditions, and also the last one, turning frequency. The another factor that decides the functioning of the composting process is carbon and nitrogen ratio. The two most important nutrients for microbial activity and growth that affect the composting process are nitrogen and carbon. A high carbon to nitrogen ratio will slow the composting process. A high nitrogen to carbon ratio will release ammonia. Although the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio is approximately 27 to 30:1. The composting process is effective within carbon to nitrogen ratios of 22 to 40. It can proceed at lower C to N ratios. However, there will be a release of ammonia. At higher C to N ratios, the process slows down. The carbon provided to the microorganisms on the feedstock is utilized for cellular growth. During microbial metabolism, carbon dioxide is evolved and released to the atmosphere. As the process progresses, the rate of microbial activity decreases and carbon dioxide evolution decreases. It is relationship between the volatile solids content of the feedstock and the carbon dioxide evolution. The higher the volatile solvents content of organic matter, the greater the production of carbon dioxide. Starches, sugars and fat decompose or mineralize much faster than proteins or cellulose, whereas lignin is very resistant to mineralization. So, let us understand the second topic, the composting process. Regardless of the system selected, the elements of the composting process are essentially the same. Configuration varies since each system attempts to optimize the unit processes to achieve the system objectives. The major steps in the composting process are as follows. The first one is the pre-processing, which includes the feedstock delivery and the handling, and the second one, feedstock preparation. The second process is going to be the composting, that includes the composting phase or active composting, and second one is the curing phase. The last one is the post-processing, that includes the refining and product preparation. During these steps, it is necessary to screen the waste. Particle size of the waste need to be reduced. Undesirable materials such as ferrous and non-ferrous metals, plastics, etc. has to be removed. It is also important to mix the solid waste because mixing is often necessary to obtain a homogeneous matrix for proper composting. However, several other elements such as feedstocks, bulking agent or amendments and final product distribution and marketing need to be considered prior to reviewing the composting process. So, what is feedstocks? The type of feedstock and its physical properties affect the delivery process, storage and handling of the feedstock prior to the composting process. The primary feedstock characteristics affecting the delivery processes are moisture content or its solids content, putrescibility, physical properties, and numerous feedstocks have been composted, and these includes like sewage sludge, biosolids, septage and night soil, and it also includes the municipal solid waste, bio waste and ad waste, food waste, generally grocery, institutional and industrial waste, and animal waste, fish waste and animal mortalities, and even the industrial waste such as pharmaceutical, pulp and paper, food processing, and everything is included as the component of the feedstock for the composting. Food wastes are generally putrescible, but their odors must be contained or treated, otherwise it will attract vectors such as flies. In addition to being a health issue, since vectors can carry and transmit pathogens, they are also a nuisance source. One large biosolids or add waste facility in California was shut down because of the nuisance source of flies and odors. In Michigan, several facilities handling large volumes of grass were shut down due to odors. In both these cases, proper delivery, storage and handling, as well as an understanding of these basic concepts of composting, could have avoided many of these problems. So, let us understand what is a bulking agent or amendments required for the composting process. A bulking agent, as the name applies, is a material generally used to control the moisture content or to provide the porosity to the feedstock. It can be organic or inorganic to provide the structural component support to enhance aeration or air movement through the matrix. For example, many of the sewage sludges, biosolids or manures are in cake form, that is mud-like consistency. These materials need to be converted into particle-like material for air to move through the matrix. If the feedstock is very wet, that is greater than 65% moisture, that is 35% solids, the addition of sawdust or previously prepared dry compost could be used to reduce the moisture content, but the resultant matrix may not provide sufficient porosity. An organic and inorganic bulking agent could then be used to provide the porosity, and even wood chips or shredded rubber tire chips would provide porosity. These, the latter bulking agents, could be screened out and reused in the process. Various different bulking agents have been used. The following is a list of the bulking agents which are used during the composting. They are the wood chips, wood shavings, rice hulls, straw, bagasse, water hyacinths, add waste, tree trimmings, shredded rubber chips, agricultural wastes, pelleted refuse, peanut hulls, etc. Bulking agents or amendments are often needed to be able to process the feedstocks in an aerobic and efficient manner. So, let us understand what are the types of composting. Hogg in 1993 classified the composting systems according to the reactor type. The classification, which is simplified, is as follows. The first one, static systems, which includes passively aerated windrows, forced aeration, that is static pile. The third one, bin, container, bag or tunnel composting. The last one, silo or vertical reactors. The second major type is the turned or agitated system, which includes windrow, drum or kiln or agitated bed. So, let us go to the phases of composting. However, it is generally accepted that composting is essentially a 4-phase process that may be summarized as follows. The first phase of the composting is the mesophilic phase that ranges from 25 to 40 degrees centigrade. In this first phase, also called as starting phase, energy rich, easily degradable compounds like sugars and proteins, which are abundant or subjected to degradation by primary decomposers such as fungi, actinobacteria and bacteria, along with worms, mites, millipedes and other mesofauna. Depending on the composting method, the contributions of these animals is either negligible or is in the special case of vermicomposting, it is considerable. It has been demonstrated that the number of mesophilic organisms in the original substrate is 3 orders of magnitude higher than the number of thermophilic organisms, but the activity of primary decomposers induces a temperature rise. So, therefore, the next phase is going to be the thermophilic phase that ranges having a temperature from 35 to 65 degrees centigrade. Organisms adapted to higher temperatures gradually replace the entire mesophilic flora. Mesophilic organisms die off and are eventually degraded by the succeeding thermophilic organisms, along with the remaining easily degradable substrates. The decomposition continues to be fast and accelerates until a temperature of about 62 degrees centigrade is reached. Thermophilic fungi do have growth maxima between 35 to 55 degrees centigrade, while higher temperature usually inhibits fungal growth. Thermotolerant and thermophilic bacteria and actinobacteria are known to remain active even at this temperature. Despite the destruction of most microorganisms beyond 65 degrees centigrade, the temperature may rise further and may exceed up to 80 degrees centigrade. It is probably that this final temperature rise is not due to the microbial activity, but rather is the effect of abiotic exothermic reactions in which temperature stable enzymes of actinobacteria might be involved. The thermophilic phase is important for hygienization also. Human and plant pathogens are destroyed. Weed seeds and insect larvae are also killed in this temperature. Not only the temperature during the thermophilic phase, but also the presence of a very specific flora dominated by actinobacteria are important for hygienization through the production of antibiotics. The disadvantage of temperatures exceeding 670 degrees centigrade is that most mesophils are killed definitely, and thus the recovery is retarded after the temperature peak. This may, however, be avoided by appropriate measures for recolonization. The third phase of the composting is the cooling phase, and that is also called the second mesophilic phase. Here the temperature starts decreasing when the activity of the thermophilic organism ceases due to exhaustion of substrates. Mesophilic organisms recolonize the substrate either originating from surviving spores through spread from the protected microniche or from external inoculation. While in the starting phase, microorganisms with the ability to degrade sugars, oligosaccharides and proteins dominate, the second mesophilic phase is characterized by increasing number of organisms that degrade starch or cellulose. Among them are both bacteria and fungi. The last phase being the maturation phase. In this phase, the quality of the substrate declines, and in several successive steps the composition of the microbial community is entirely altered. Usually the proportion of fungi increases while bacterial numbers decline. Compounds that are further degradable such as lignin humus complexes are formed and become predominant. Overall, important characteristics during pre and main composting and post composting mature phase can be summarized as follows. During pre and main composting that runs for 1 to 6 weeks, degradation of easily degradable compounds such as sugar, starch, pectin, protein, etc. occurs. Inactivation of pathogenic microorganism due to temperature and weed seeds also can occur. High oxygen demand, emissions of odor and drainage water occurs. In the second component, during post-composting mature phase that runs for 3 weeks to 1 year, here the degradation of difficult to decay degradable compounds such as hemicelluloses, wax, fat, oil, cellulose and lignin occurs. Composition of the high molecular weight compounds also is seen. Low oxygen demand, low emissions that generally seen. The composting process is completely guided by the consortia of microorganisms and its interaction within the compost. Let us understand the role of microorganisms in composting. Composting induces high metabolic activities of microorganisms at the high density, that is up to 10 to the power of 12 cells per gram. The constant change in conditions like temperature, pH, aeration, moisture, availability of substrates result in stages of exponential growth and stationary phases of various organisms. The microbial consortia present at any point of time are replaced by others in short intervals. The problem, however, is that despite their viability, a minor fraction of the microbes can be cultivated. Biodegradation processes in nature are commonly comparable to a continuous culture from microbiological point of view, and the most important determinant factors are external like substrate quality, temperature, moisture, etc. Composting in contrast resembles a batch culture with steady changes in substrate composition and biochemical conditions. Wide range of microorganisms play important role in decomposing the organic waste in the compost during different stages. For example, cellulolytic, lignolytic, Thielavia thermophilia, Armillaria mellia, Clitopilus insitus, Pleurothus astriotus, Lentinus lepidus, Fomus, etc. are found during composting process. Many community wastes can be composted, thus a single composting facility can handle municipal and industrial organic biosolids, municipal solid waste, yard wastes and food waste, etc. A composting facility can be designed and operated to minimize environmental impacts. Odors and bioaerosols can be controlled. With today's technology, facilities and operations should not produce offensive odors. Composting can help to meet landfill reduction and recycling goals. Composting can decompose or degrade many organic materials. Composting produces a usable product. Not only is the product usable, but as a soil conditioner, it can serve soil moisture, reduce erosion by improving infiltration and reducing the runoff. Compost adds carbon to the soil. It thus sequesters carbon, reducing the greenhouse gas, but it has got its disadvantages also. The odor, dust and bioaerosol emissions can occur during the process. These odors and bioaerosols can be controlled through better facilities design and operations management. Composting facilities take up more space than some other waste management technologies. The space requirements are often related to storage and market demand. A product must be marketed. So, let us conclude this session saying that the use of compost sequesters carbon and reduces carbon dioxide emissions. Composting is the ultimate in recycling. Functionally, the only use of compost is to the benefit of our society. Composting reduces dependence on landfills, incineration and other non-friendly environmental technologies. The use of compost improves our soils to reduce runoff and erosion, increases the organic content of the soil for better water utilization by plants, and improves soil structure and better soil aeration for better plant development. Thank you.